U.S. and Chinese negotiators are meeting in London for a second day, aiming to turn a temporary truce on trade tariffs into a lasting deal. Both countries are trying to build on negotiations in Geneva last month that agreed a 90-day suspension of most tariffs they had imposed on each other. Officials are also seeking a deal on Chinese exports of rare earths, essential for manufacturing computer chips and batteries for electric vehicles. For more, we're joined now by our DW business colleague, Cassandra Sun. Cassandra, there's been quite a tone shift from the U.S. when it comes to China, hasn't there?
Yeah, that's right. Ever since there was this one-on-one, or at least the first publicly acknowledged one-on-one phone call between President Trump and President Xi, there has been a lot more optimism, and definitely from the U.S. side. And so what we're hearing from the U.S. side, like I said, very optimistic. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is there in London. He said today that trade talks are going well. And on the table is export controls. That's basically this tactic that countries will use. Instead of outright banning the export of something, they put all these restrictions in place to make it just a little bit more difficult to send it out, right? And one thing that's really irked China is that under the Biden administration, the U.S. put export controls on semiconductors. And this has meant that very few, if any, of these high-powered chips could actually get into China. That's why, this is a little bit of a tangent, but follow me, that DeepSeek artificial intelligence model kind of blew everyone's minds earlier this year, because the thinking in the industry was that China just didn't have enough of these semiconductors to make something this powerful, and that was because of U.S. export controls on semiconductors. So now officials say they are willing to lift these export controls on some semiconductors, so that chip is on the table for now. But what the U.S. wants on the other side of this is more access to rare earth metals, which are used not only in the auto sector, but also the defense sector, and almost in like every gadget you and I have on us these days.
What signals are we seeing then, if any?
So a lot of optimism from the U.S. side, and the Trump administration has sent some higher-level officials, like the Commerce Secretary, like I said. And in exchange for easing some of these export controls from the Chinese side, the U.S. has said that it would be willing to allow more semiconductors out. And this isn't just like whispers. This is an economic advisor saying that this is on the table. But what's really interesting to me is what this chapter, these negotiations, mean for this broader saga of the trade war, right? So at the beginning of the Trump administration, China was sending delegations to the U.S. to try to appeal to Trump's transactional nature, right? But that didn't work. And then both sides played hardball, ratcheting each other up to almost triple-digit tariffs, right? And then there were these talks in May, these marathon talks in Geneva, and China stuck to its guns, and it got results. And so China now is not the same China that the Trump administration was negotiating in its first term. It's got its vice premier in London as part of these negotiations, another high-level official, but it also has the vice commerce minister, Li Shenzhang. And what folks need to know about him is that he used to be the Chinese envoy to the World Trade Organization, which means he's used to using the rules of global trade to push back against the Americans, and Americans who have sat on the other side of the negotiating table from him say he's a tough and experienced negotiator.
How do businesses feel about all of this?
Yeah, the indexes so far on the opening of Wall Street today are mixed. Everyone's kind of holding their breath to see what comes through with these negotiations. The vice premier from China has said that he's going to be in London all week, so we could be in for the long haul here. And we're hearing about U.S. auto companies putting pressure on the White House. They're hearing from their suppliers that, they're a few weeks away from running out of things that they need to make cars, because these magnets, they don't only go in motors, they're also in like the little gizmo that moves your seat back and forth when you're going like sitting in the front of a car. So there's a lot of pressure here from these businesses on the American side. And what I'm going to be looking for is, what is the scope of the agreement that's reached here, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the end of the week? Is it just resolving the squibbles and squabbles that we've heard since the truce was put in place last month? Or are we starting to resolve some of these key issues that started this trade war off in the first place?
All right. Thank you so much for following these talks for us. That was Cassandra Sun.